GBC 24, time to bring you your program, Legends of Our Time. On Legends of Our Time, we celebrate great personalities who are making society better for you and I. My name is Gifty Eji. Now, today we are privileged to host on the program one of the most highly respected senior statesmen Ghana has ever produced. Our guest, a former president of this nation, was the first in the Fourth Republic to lead his political party, the NPP, to wrestle power from the then ruling NDC in the year 2000. He was to rule Ghana for the ensuing 8 years until his government also lost power back to the NDC in 2008. Even his harshest critics agree that his tenure as president brought so many pro-poor social interventions which will touch so many lives. Dear viewers, our guest for today is His Excellency, the former president of this republic, Mr. John Agyekum Kufuor. Excellency, thank you so much for having us.
Welcome, Gifty.
We're grateful.
And your crew. I'm happy you are here in my home.
Thank you. You look good. What's the secret? 80 years. It's no joke.
You should have added 80 years young. Well, thanks God. It's God's doing for me. And I'm thankful. I'm grateful.
So what's the secret? What have you been doing on a daily basis to stay fit?
Admit that you've served your time. And that's where I am now. It's just rests. Okay. And observing from the sidelines and also looking around our nation into the larger world and keeping a good conscience and a good heart and living by the advice of your doctors and handlers. That's what I'm doing.
That's great.
Trying to be happy.
That's great. Now, tell us about your early childhood. I know you come from Kumasi, yes, but I don't know the exact area where you come from. So take this opportunity to tell us more.
I'm sure you've heard of Ashtown.
Exactly, I've heard about Ashtown. What's so special about your village? Tell us. Or your area, Ashtown.
Ashtown is the nucleus of Kumasi.
Okay.
That's where Manshia is. And my father, my mother, they were both from there. That's where I was born. And I grew up. I went to school at the then government school. These days, the place is called Asim Boys School.
I'll give you the opportunity to talk about your educational background.
Yes.
But I know you come from a family of 10. You have 9 other siblings.
My mother had 10 children, and I was the 7th.
How challenging?
I am the 7th, but 5 have left us, and the remaining 5 include our firstborn, who is 96, a lady, but perhaps the strongest of us all, 96. And then the 3rd one is also alive. It's here in Accra. She should be moving into her 90s now, if she's not already 90. And then the 6th one, the one I follow immediately, is again a lady, a retired lawyer, lives here in Accra. She is now 84, but much stronger than I. And then I come. Thank God, next week, everything going fine. I'm 80. So, and then the one after me immediately, I'm sure you've heard of Dr. Kufuor, yes, who used to be Minister of Defense, also chasing me around, very energetic. And now he's like the last of us because the remaining 2 also passed on. Okay. We were quite a happy lot, very privileged, I must add. Very, very privileged because the family, especially my mother's family, in terms of, if you like, resources, was, as far as we grew to know, always like very privileged. So we all
was
grew up.
actually a queen mother, Alan.
Yes, yes. My father was also a chieftain, a very powerful chieftain. But you know that Kumasi, on the accounts generally, we are matrilineal. So when you talk in terms of family, you tend to emphasize your mother's lineage.
Exactly.
So we were all raised so well. I've had some of the best education you could have then and even now. For instance, of us, we were 5 boys, 5 girls. The girls, 2 trained as lawyers, reached the ranks of a chief state attorney. 1 passed on. The one I come after is still alive. The first sister, the firstborn, was the wife of the then Asantehene Otumfuor Setutu, or Agyekum Prempe. In fact, their grandchild is walking around here.
The one sitting there.
Yes. She schooled in the government girls' school of those times. Privileged, but because of the family, my mother's side and Otumfuor's family have been intermarrying from the beginnings of Asante for the past 300 years.
Wow.
Every generation they married. We married them and they married us. So that's how. And then the boys, my big brother, who became professor of chemistry, tech, also trained government school at Chimota in those times, and then Bristol University, earning his PhD. First Asante to have attained that degree. Then the next boy, unfortunately, passed on young. But I came and also had, as I said, some very good schooling. And most of us, it's all in the family. No, it wasn't state. At Kufuor, Oxford, at Kufuor, Cambridge, the youngest boy, Belfast, that sort of thing. So we were very privileged. And because of that, and because of the cultural and social intersection, right from childhood, you are made to feel that there's some duty for you to perform.
Okay.
Duty, as you grew up, that would expose you to leadership, even within your age group.
Can you explain some of these duties that?
Well, in my both mother and father's homes, the cultural background was instilled in you. Things to say, things not to say, what not to do, what to do. If you like, especially my father's side was rigorously traditional. We were not even allowed to whistle in the house. And then on certain days, strict observance of what's acceptable, what's taboo. The sort of things to eat and not to eat. So you grow up with all these things, and they shape you. Then when we get introduced to schools, the modern schools, it wasn't acceptable for you not to apply yourself. And this is how I think we all managed to get higher education. The family frowned on failure. So we were pushed. And then we were so competitive, indiscriminately between the sexes. The girls, in many ways, tended even to be better. And so you feel ashamed that the others are moving on and you are not struggling. So this is the family I grew up into.
Let's look at your early educational background. I've read extensively on you, but none of them mention where you had your first...
That's the government school, Kumasi.
Okay. Which school was that?
The government school of Kumasi was perhaps the most elitist. No, the structures are there. Governor Gagisbeck, who built Achimota Kolebu, was the guy who also built Kumasi Government School. And you need to see the architecture, the size of it, the playing fields. The school then I started school for 45. The school had 3 football parks. Can you imagine in those times? Those times, 3 football parks with toilets that had sinks or water basins for washing after you've been in the...
Which year was that?
Oh, in the 40s. In fact, the school was founded in 25 or so. But I went 45. That's 20 years after it's founding, but right from initial times. The pipe-borne water, washing basins, and I think the school had about a set of 12. The entire population wasn't bigger than, say, about 600 or 700. And then even the toilets were like the water closet type.
So what happened that today we have schools that don't even have water?
Well, I think
water
it's a matter of overpopulation.
Okay.
No, the population exploded, and because say, even at independence, as recent as 57, the population of the country was just about 6 million. Now, we are over 30 million. And the resources or the economy didn't grow at the same pace as the population. So there's a gap that somehow we haven't managed to close in terms of economic resources and the demand of population. And this is, I think, the basic cause. And this is why, to me, if you are talking economy, I say that let's prioritize wealth creation. We must grow the wealth as fast as we can. We've got the natural resources. The challenge of politics and leadership should be to harness the resources, modernize them, grow the economy as fast as we can. So we have the resources to look after each and every one of us in the country.
Exactly. Now let's look at life at Osei Tutu and
Osei Tutu boarding school.
Share with us the experience.
Yes, at 51, I was moved from the elite school of government school, which was a day school, to a boarding school. It was a Methodist boarding school. To continue from standard 4. In those times, we taught primary school, and in infant and primary ending at standard 3, and then middle school, starting from standard 4 to standard 7. The Osei Tutu boarding school, which was originally part of the Wesley College, Teacher Training College complex, owned by the Methodist Church in Kumasi. I think 1950 or so, the Methodist authorities decided to move the boys' boarding school from the Wesley College compound to 10 miles out of town, Kumasi, Asante Akropong. And 51, I was sent there. The girls' school, incidentally, Osei Tutu boys, was Mofretro, which is still there. Another very classic school. There is like a school for preparation of girls to go to Wesley Girls. Okay. You know the quality of Wesley Girls. The boys' school, somehow we were moved because it was getting a reputation that the perhaps Methodists thought it should be more disciplined. So they sent the school out of Kumasi to Malton, Akropong. And that's where I was sent for 3 years. It turned out to be a blessing because...
Why do you say so?
I say so because till I got into boarding school, everything was done for me at home.
Pampered.
Pampered. Going there forced me to learn to even keep myself clean.
Wow.
Oof. Early in the morning by 5:30 or so, you'd be aroused to go and fetch water from wells and things like that. And I hadn't carried water before in my life until then.
And how did it feel? You know, you think it was a punishment, or?
I almost thought that. but it was a punishment. And I lost weight. But then it was a mixed school, government school in Kumasi. Yes, we had a few non-Astantes there, but Osei boarding school was a real mix. Boys my age were sent from Accra, Cape Coast, and even some from the north came. The Methodists picked us. So you begin to feel that there's a bigger society than what you saw earlier in Kumasi. You mix with these boys, and it was also very competitive. The teachers were so highly trained, professionals from Wesley College. For instance, the first headmaster who admitted me there had been trained in Britain. It was just an elementary school. And from Osei to I think about 52 or 53, he was promoted to become the vice principal of Wesley College itself. One of the teachers rose to become, eventually after his degree, to become the head of the civil service of Ghana, Teacher Sakia, from Winneba. He passed on, and fantastic teacher, very patient, and had a knack to spot talent. And then the other one, Mr. Isi, I think from a Kropon area, also became professor of geography. I haven't heard of him. Another one, Mr. Taylor, was the carpentry master, also trained in Britain. And it was a small school. I don't think we numbered more than 200.
Okay.
But it was a very expensive school. And after I left 54, my brother, Kufuor, also was sent, but you know, he had just 2 years or so stint, and then from there he went to Achimota. I went to Prempeh. Somehow the parents couldn't keep up with the costs. So they closed the school and turned it into, I think, a teacher training institute. But so it was great. For instance, there we had boxing, training in boxing, where you could get whipped easily by age group coming from Accra or places like that where they were used to. Yeah. So your psychology is shaped. You get to respect. You might think yourself good, say academically, and yet you'd meet people your age who
excelled in sports.
Sports and academics and everything. Good training. And if, say, the Methodists had maintained that school, I believe it would have served the nation very well. And from there, I went to Prempeh 54. With a secondary school, a bigger school. Population then was, I think, about 600, with large compounds, and potentially very good, in the sense that this was a school, till Prempeh Asante as a whole didn't have a secondary school of stature. There were some schools, but Prempeh in a way became the first secondary school, state secondary school, like Achimota, Fancy Adisada. And it was again set up by a partnership of the Asantehene or Asantemine Methodists, the Methodist Church and the Presbyterian Church together, 3 of them. And they brought teachers from Fansipim to found the school. The first one, the first headmaster, called Pearson, an Englishman, I think trained in Cambridge or thereabouts, from Fansipim, Reverend Pearson, was sent to, more or less on the invitation of the then Asantehene, to come and set up such a school of quality. And so Pearson apparently selected students who should have gone to Fansipim to come with him to set up Prempeh. And of course, he also picked some people locally from around Kumasi and Sante. And the first batch of students he started the school with in 1949 turned out to be such excellent students who, I believe, all to the man, rose to become national personalities, including some who became governors of the central bank, professors in the medical school of Ghana, and in other fields of endeavor, researchers at Bonsu Kufuor Research Institute. Everywhere they turned, they became like tops.
So, Excellency, from Prempeh, you traveled outside the country for further studies, and then you majored in law. Why that decision to study law?
Well, I was in a way guided.
Let me take a quick break. When I come back, I'll give you the opportunity to answer that question. You're still watching Legends of Our Time on GBC 24. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk more with His Excellency. Please stay. Still watching Legends of Our Time on GBC 24. My name is Gifty AJ, and my guest for today is His Excellency, the former president of this republic, Mr. John Agyekum Kufuor. Excellency, before we went for the break, I asked you why you traveled outside the country to, study law, to further education, and then specialized in the legal field.
Well, I had performed well. Very well, exceptionally well, at the secondary level. My big brother, who had returned from his studies, studied chemistry, and had gotten his PhD from Bristol University, very young age, 26, 27, in those days. Straight from first degree, they allowed him to do it. Came back, and incidentally, he also tried to do law in addition to chemistry. He did the first part, came back. There was a shift in the family because our uncle, incidentally, who was original Agyekum, the teacher trained at Government Teacher Training College, which became Achimata, insisted and directed us. But our uncle had been taken ill and sent to Britain, where he died 55. My big brother returned to Ghana 54 to teach at Tech, which was then a university college. Then looked at me, and said, look, you go and study law. At that time, Ghana was thinking of setting up, just after independence, setting up the law school. But my brother said the politics in the country was too intense. He said, no, he wasn't sure politics would be maintained. So go to Britain. Start with law. Go to all levels I had attained. But the results showed that I was qualified to even enter the Inns of Court. Go and do your bar like you are doing your A-levels. And from there, feel free to do anything. And he believed I could do it within 2 years. So it was he who really pressed me into. And it happened like that. I went, thankfully, I told you of the privilege. The family had a house in London. At the time, in the 50s, 59, and 5-bedroom house with everything. My sisters were there, the two before me, Marian and Cecilia. Cecilia's husband, a West Indian who naturalized as Ghanaian, exceptionally brilliant person, had topped the bar list in Britain, I think 58 or so. I went to Britain 59, and it was he who guided me to be registered at Lincoln's Inn. And she showed me how to work. And within 18 months, I had finished, and I was called to the bar, 1961, at Lincoln's Inn. So I was a barrister at the age of 22, and it nearly went into my head. So So I came back, but the same year I was admitted to Oxford to continue with the law. Oxford, you must pass your first year, otherwise you are sent down. I passed that, and quickly I rushed back to Ghana, 62, to be called to the bar here. So by 62 February or so, I was qualified. But when I went back to Oxford, instead of continuing with the law, somehow politics had already entered my system deep. So I went, told my rector of the college, an old professor, who incidentally had been the moral tutor of Professor Buzia in the 40s. He was still around, that old man, and he admitted me. Buzia was my referee, incidentally, to Oxford. The old man said, I went to tell him that I didn't want to continue with law. He was baffled, couldn't understand. Why? He said, I just want to stretch my mind. I want to do philosophy, politics, and economics. Consider the whole thing, said, if that's your wish. He called the law tutor and told him. The man was also aghast, sir. I said, that's what I wanted. I just wouldn't continue.
And what accounted for that decision from legal studies?
I had been to Ghana,
politics.
I had seen the trend in politics, and I was charged that I would need these disciplines to round me, make me rounded. Law was already in the bag, but I hadn't any idea of
politics.
Politics vaguely
Philosophy.
I had, but I knew philosophy would help me to think and think properly. Economics I wanted to know. I hadn't had any experience of economics. But Oxford had this composite course called PPE, Philosophy, Politics, Economics, and is the field that has produced many of the prime ministers of Britain. Margaret Thatcher did it. Cameron did it.
David Cameron.
He didn't, fortunately, he messed up the country. But when you go back, so many of their prime ministers had such preparation. So I said, that's what I wanted to do, because I felt that my future might be in the public sector. And so they gave in to me. And I switched, and I was forced to do the course in 2 years.
Okay.
It wasn't easy.
But you managed.
I managed.
You came back.
I got the degree all right in 64. Straight from there, I got a very juicy job in Britain. Paid well. Incidentally, I married my wife.
Had 2 children.
2 children. We met more or less in Oxford. She was trained in the university hospital. Met nurse midwife and I. So we wanted to take our time to come back to Ghana. But my family sent message after that if I had finished.
You should come home.
The place. Because the family was scattered then. So my mother insisted I should be back. And we left December of 64 to get here. January 65, we came by boat. Straight, I went to the chambers of late Mr. Victor Osu, Komfanochi Chambers in Kumasi. Arguably one of the best chambers of the times in Ghana. We were there, but then exactly 1 year, the coup d'etat of 66 happened. Victor Osu was invited by the NLC to become the Attorney General of Ghana. And he left his chambers to another senior called Ousi and myself. So I was there for 2 years, 3 years. But all the time my sights were on politics.
On politics.
And then...
And what accounted for that fire in you?
That time. You know, had grown into a country where abundance, like economically, was the order of the day. I left for Britain 59, got back 62 to be enrolled at the bar here, only to find that within 3-4 years of independence, things were changing so fast economically. There was no joy. There was the Detention Act with people being grabbed and detained houses who had been born in Ghana and were under the British laws, Ghanaians, had been deported, more or less arbitrarily, to Nigeria. And people were just not happy, especially around Kumasi. And I looked at the scene and felt perhaps I could contribute to right all those things happening. The economic front, no good. When we got back 65, we went to the Kingsway stores. And it was all dusty, no goods on the shelves, and people were just mourning. The economy was down. And so when the coup happened in 66, there was great jubilation all over Ghana. Jubilation that lasted over a year. And so with the background of law, philosophy, politics, I felt prepared for that. But I was young, still 26, 27. And how do I get my community to see that I was quite mature and ripe for politics? I took the job.
You contested
before I contested, because the contest didn't come till 69, but the coup had happened in 66, and I needed to position myself to be considered as a serious
candidate.
So I took the job of town clerkship, the city manager of Kumasi, was 27, and I had staff of 4,000, including engineers, medical doctors, accountants, and then ordinary laborers and conservancy work. 3 years that I was on top of that job, Kumasi was calm, people were happy, there was order, administration-wise, and so people thought this guy, given the chance, could work.
You were better positioned to do the job.
So 68, I got elected to the Constituent Assembly to help write the Constitution of the Second Republic. And it was during those times the PP, Progress Party, led by Professor Buzia, was formed. 69, when we finished with the Constitution, the PP had been formed. I was a founding member, and I stood the elections at Chumangwa Biaja, just outside Kumasi. I won to come to Parliament, and Professor Buzia made me Deputy Foreign Minister. I was then 30.
And how was it as the Deputy Foreign Minister at that young age?
The exposure was fantastic. I told you Buzia had been my referee to go to Oxford. And the bond between me and him was so close. And of course, Buzia was a teacher himself. And see, when a teacher gets a student, he sees potential in a good teacher would nurture such a student. That's how Buzia treated me. I got exposure to the United Nations, to the African Organization of African Unity, to non-aligned movement, and to all the places around the world where I met names you could then only read about or watch on television. Met them personally, one-on-one. It helped. But within 2 years, our government was removed in a coup led by late Achampo. And God landed in
the Deputy Foreign Affairs Minister, what would you say were some of your achievements?
For instance, I led the Ghana delegation 71 to the United Nations, where the UN took the votes on China, the China question. Till that time, Taiwan of today was the country which styled itself China that sat as a permanent member of the Security Council. Big China, or Communist China, was kept out of UN. But the debate had been raging year after year. The world was divided ideologically, the West and the East. And the Cold War raged. So the West, led by the United States, just resisted China becoming part of the United Nations. And but down the years, the world had come around to see that there couldn't be a United Nations of the nations of the world without the biggest country in terms of population, at least, China, mainland China or communist China, being part of it. 71, the United States relented. And that was when, for instance, I met the father of the President Bush. He was then the permanent rep of the United Nations, and he invited me and said the U.S. wanted the support of Ghana on the China issue. So I told him direct that my government really believed communist China should be part of the United Nations, even though we didn't agree with communism, because we thought United Nations should include the world as a whole. The man said, yes, we agree to that now. And then I said, so, and the question was put by you at the UN in 3 ways, whether communist China should come to UN or not. They said Ghana would vote yes. The other one, second one, which of the two Chinas, Little China, Taiwan, or Communist China coming to should take the permanent seat at the Security Council? So I told the man, once we allow Big China in, then it should be Big China taking the Security Council seat, and not Little China. The poor man scratched his head and said, all right. So I said, the third question, whether Little China should also continue to be part of UN. And I said, yes, because that time Taiwan had a population of over 14 million, and Ghana was only 10 million or so. So I told him. So, and Little China didn't depend on Big China or anything to maintain itself as a sovereign state. So we vote for Little China also to remain. So the 3 questions, Ghana was to vote yes, yes. The man said, thank you. The U.S. will agree with you along these lines. It was a great moment for me. So, and it was the biggest attended General Assembly of the United Nations on this China matter. So when the UN was taking the decision, they called, this was a roll call of nations, member nations, Nation A, and the leader of such a country would go to the podium to say how the nation would vote and why. Some said they would vote, but they declined to go and explain. When it got to Ghana, I told the ambassadors, and I went with about 8 ambassadors, all senior and very professional. So they thought I wouldn't know what to say. And I told them, I'll go and stand there and say why Ghana would do what it would do. And I went, starting off, why we would vote to admit Big China, why we believe Big China should take the Security Council seat. But when I said Little China should continue to be member of the General Assembly, I was booed. Because, as I said, the world was so divided. The leftists, and they were quite a lot, because Africa then, in the immediate post-independence time, we tended to be leftists. Oh! So I walked away to sit. I think the next country to have explained itself that way was Israel. And then other countries, South America, followed. Then the booing turned out to be clapping. So our ambassadors who had gone with me and who thought I was going to do things that might disgrace our country, they sat, and when the swing came, I turned on them and said, have I disgraced Ghana?
No.
They couldn't answer.
Not at all.
Then I think the Italian minister also Before we knew, he walked to us and wanted a statement. Ghana statement, could he get a copy? I didn't speak from any written statement because my ambassadors wouldn't give me the statement.
Wow.
So I came away feeling. And then America became so grateful to us. It was then Mr. Bush elder came to thank us again and said, President Nixon was then President of the United States, looked on Ghana as a friend, and that the wife would visit Ghana. So Mrs. Nixon came here.
Because of what you did there?
Well, because of what my government, it was the thinking of my government. I was only the spokesperson.
Excellency. You're still watching Legends of Our Time on GBC 24. We'll take another break. We'll be right back. Please stay. Watching Legends of Our Time on GBC 24. Of course, this is the platform where we celebrate great personalities who are making all of us proud. My name is Gifty Ej, and my guest for today is His Excellency, the former President of the Republic, Mr. John Agyekum Kufuor. Excellency.
Yes.
Before the NPP was birthed, what was the political environment in the country then?
You remember Professor Dubois' lecture, the Ghanaian Sphinx, the culture of silence. You remember?
Yeah.
The country was like under a spell. Things were tough, very difficult, but somehow it seemed like everybody was afraid to talk. It wasn't good. But then around 89, there was a dramatic change in the world. Till then, the Cold War prevailed, and the world seemed divided between the East and the West. With the Berlin Wall that divided East and West of Berlin, Germany, firmly in place to show that there wasn't any relaxation or reconciliation. But somehow by 89, with America's leadership changing to Mr. Reagan, and then the Russians, the Soviet Union being led by Mr. Gorbachev, there was a break in this very tense, like irreconcilable relationship. The Berlin Wall fell, and with that, the Soviet system also collapsed. And then there was an atmosphere of liberalization all over the world. And then in Ghana, the then military dictatorship began talking of return to constitutional rule. And the late Justice Annan, I believe, led the team from government side to seek the opinion of the country. And the report was that the country wanted to return to civilian governance under constitution. So the atmosphere changed. People started expressing themselves, and then the party formation, because Annan's report had recommended multi-party system. So those of us from the what we would describe as Dankwa Buzia tradition, we began meeting. Kumasi really started the serious movement, the Dankwa Buzia Club. It was formed around, if you know Kumasi, a Methodist school where Reverend Asante Entry was the then pastor. A pastor with strong political inclination. But the real person, the guy who got together with Reverend Asante Entry to form the club was called Atakrejima, the journalist who had worked from colonial times with the Pioneer, and I believe had associated with late Dr. Dankwa and Professor Buzia. So they formed this group, and they started talking liberal, democratic, constitutional governance. And so they got together like-minded people to attend the meetings of this club. I was then in Accra, and initially I wasn't attending the club meeting. So messages were sent to me to go. And I attended once, looked at the people who attended, and sensed some seriousness, real seriousness amongst them. And I got the feeling with some push and direction, the club, when the time came, could easily convert to the sort of party that would harbor the value systems of the Dankwabuzia tradition. So I started attending regularly, and they met Saturdays in the morning. Drive from Accra, Kumasi, and go. And my brother, the Kufuor, too, used to attend. At another meeting, and the membership was growing among the professionals, lawyers, and so one meeting, I got the feeling I should come and get some of the people here in Accra who thought like
to join.
For instance, I went to Nana Kufuor's chambers once, tell him, hey, what's starting in Kumasi, we better join him. And he agreed, and also started going. And Mr. Odoi Sykes too, I remember I drove with him all the way from Accra to Kumasi. And then eventually the constitution was promulgated, and then the party formation came on.
Party.
And then 92, when the election was going to take place, Professor Dubois, who was very political, but not, I would say, practitioner in terms of party, he was an academic. But because he had delivered this lecture, I think 88, on the Ghanaian Sphinx, and breaking this spell, there was such a swell of goodwill for him, and also it come by an image of courage and outspokenness. And so the party, the new party, thought he was the one to represent us in the 92 election. I contested him though, because I thought I was a regular practitioner in party, and I had government experience. But I do won the 92. And we believed we would win the 92 election because the economy was in a mess, and then people hadn't felt free.
So what do you think accounted for the loss?
Well, I wouldn't know, but see, the government of the day, the military government, somehow converted itself into civilian government, but still it had appointed the electoral commission. But electoral commission was his creation, and people really feared the leadership of that government, which had turned itself like some leopard trying to clad itself with the fleece of a lamb. People thought they are being careful. Not better off, they needed to be careful. But we felt the verdict had been stolen. So the party, after the election, wrote the stolen verdict. I believe Nana Kufuor and Dr. Rekubrobe and others put together that document. And the party boycotted the parliamentary election. That time, the presidential election and parliamentary election didn't take place same time. We did the presidential later. But after the stolen verdict and the presidency, the party decided not to even take part in the parliamentary one. That's how NDC had a monopoly of government, both the presidency and the parliamentary sides of government for between 92 and 96.
Anyway, this is how we wrap up on today's program, Legends of Our Time on GBC 24. My name is Gifty Ej, and my guest has been the former President of the Republic, Mr. John Agyekum Kufuor. We'll come your way same time next week. Until then, bye for now.
Abwa Ghana, na Ghana beyo.